the special town meeting for Brookline, Massachusetts for the fall of 2022. My name is Kate Poverman. I am the town moderator. I am glad to be back in the seat. I want to thank the assistant moderator, Sandy Gadsby, for so ably substituting for me while I had COVID and various other issues. We have a new assistant moderator, Jonathan Karen, who will be moderating a couple of articles during this session. I acknowledge that there has been proper and public posting of the warrant and return of service. And now Ms. Vina Priestley will be singing the Star Spangled Banner for us.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Vina. That was beautiful. We will now go to Felina Silver Robinson for the Indigenous Peoples Acknowledgement. Yes.
As we gather today as town meeting members, let us take a moment to acknowledge the history of this land we call Brookline. This is the unceded land of the Massachusetts people, whose traditions, language, and stewardship continue today through their lineal descendants, the Massachusetts tribe of Ponkapog. Today, we are living on the land that was taken by force. By 1641, the colonists in Brookline had allocated to themselves almost all land that had been inhabited by Indigenous people. Land was not the only form of theft that occurred. Lives were also stolen. Historical records state that in 1675, during King Philip's War, 7 Indigenous men were sold into slavery in the Caribbean by residents of the area that we now call Brookline. The 7 men represent part of the early slave trade. Slavery in Brookline continued and grew, but too soon those enslaved were of African descent. By 1746, enslavers claimed ownership of over half of all Brookline land. We acknowledge the theft of land, culture, and lives, and the ensuing enslavement of Indigenous and African peoples that occurred here. These early policies set the stage for centuries of systemic racism. As we remember these atrocities, town meeting members and the larger town must commit ourselves to address the ongoing inequities that are the result of our history of colonialism and racism. Although we as individuals were not perpetrators of these atrocities, we benefit from these systems. Thus, we dedicate ourselves to addressing them today.
Thank you very much. We are now going to have a presentation on how to conduct these meetings and the chat line on Zoom. It was previously recorded by Ben Franco, and we are going to show it to you again since we can't do any better than he did a year or two ago. seconds. Then I want to say I'm grateful that my assistant moderator had a lot of experience, and I will again say that I would love it if people will keep their cameras on to the extent possible, because in the spring we'll see each other, but it would be nice to be able to recognize some of the faces instead of meeting so many anew. So, and I would like to see faces instead of looking at some just black boxes. Difficulties. I will explain how to vote on Zoom while they are getting the chat line presentation ready. To vote on Zoom, a screen will come up with a yes or no option and a submit one. You will decide whether you are in favor of the motion or against it and press yes or no accordingly and submit. The voting period will last 45 seconds unless expressly stated otherwise. Once you have voted, you cannot change your vote. The totals of votes will be announced, but you will not know whether your vote has been correctly recorded or how your colleagues have voted until the town clerk posts the results the next day, so tomorrow. If your vote has been incorrectly recorded, contact the town clerk. If you missed a vote because you stepped away for a minute, you have lost the opportunity to cast that vote. If there were technical difficulties such as Comcast cutting out, which may be a problem tomorrow, we have found out, that prevented you from voting, contact the town clerk the next day and explain the situation. And it will be determined whether or not you had just cause for not being able to vote and whether you can cast your vote at that time. If there are wide-ranging difficulties like a Comcast outage, call the help desk and alert them of the fact by calling 617-879-3110. Carol Hillman, what about abstaining? They don't have that as an option, I believe. Do they? Is it on the screen? I just can't remember. Oh, okay. Carol Hillman had a question about whether or not there was an abstention option on the screen. And I honestly don't remember. Does any? Yes, there is. Yes.
Functionality of Zoom this evening and tell those present in the meeting how to navigate around the platform. By default, your microphone will be muted and you'll be unable to unmute yourself until the support staff for this meeting gives you permission to do so. When it's your turn to speak, the moderator will call on you. A few seconds later, you will see a prompt on your screen asking you to unmute yourself, and you'll have to click OK to acknowledge that prompt. After seeing the prompt, you may need to complete the unmuting process by clicking the mute unmute button at the bottom far left corner of the screen. A note to town meeting couples. Please be sure that only one of you have your device's audio turned on when you are unmuted. Having only one audio output will help to limit audio interference for those present in this meeting. If you're a town meeting member who has joined tonight's session by phone, your microphone will also be muted by default. The votes of town meeting members participating via phone will be captured via roll call following the completion of the 30-second voting period. This will obviously require town meeting members joining by phone to be unmuted. The support staff for this meeting will handle the unmuting process centrally, and no action will be required by town meeting members on the phone. When called upon to vote by the moderator, those on the phone should wait approximately 3 seconds and then tell the moderator how they wish to be recorded on the pending vote. Immediately to the right of the mute unmute button is the start stop video button. This button allows you to turn your allows you to turn your camera on and off. If you're comfortable doing so and your internet bandwidth and technology allows, you may turn your camera on. If you experience choppy audio or video during tonight's session, we suggest that you keep your video off for the duration of the meeting. Turning a video off will limit the internet bandwidth you are uploading, thereby allowing for more room for you to download audio and video. As a reminder, if your camera is turned on, it will broadcast everything it captures to those present in the meeting. Please be mindful of this. The participant button is immediately to the right of the Start Stop Video button, allowing you to see the name of everybody present in the meeting. At the top of the list of those present, you'll see a number of accounts related to the running of this virtual town meeting. Below these accounts, you'll see a list of town meeting members, staff, and guests present in the meeting, listed in alphabetical order by last name. Next to each name, you'll see information about who a town meeting member represents, a precinct number, and the letters AL to denote at-large status, or that a person is a guest in the meeting. A guest might be a non-town meeting member, presenter on a warrant article, or town staff. For example, this meeting naming convention will make a town meeting member appear as Obama, Michelle, P1. Immediately to the right of the participants button, you'll see a chat icon. You can access the chat feature by clicking this icon. During town meeting, you will only be able to chat with the chat monitor account. This means you'll be unable to chat with other town meeting members individually or as a group. So please do not use the chat feature to try and broadcast your views on a particular article to your colleagues. During town meeting, the chat feature should be used for two purposes. First, to get in line to address town meeting, akin to lining up at the microphone during an in-person town meeting. Your request to speak could, for example, be to ask a question or make a comment. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment during town meeting, please send a message to the chat monitor account that contains, in this order, your first name, last name, the letter P and your precinct number, or the letters AL and the word question or comment. For example, Hillary Clinton, P5, comment. The second reason you might use the chat feature this evening is to raise a procedural point. For example, to call the question or to raise a point of order. If you wish to make a procedural motion during town meeting, please send a message to the chat monitor account that reads your first name, last name, the letter P and the precinct number, and type the motion you wish to make. For example, Michael Dukakis, P4, point of order. As the chat monitor account receives requests from town meeting members to ask a question or make a comment, I will do my best to post a running list of that queue. To see a queue, you'll need to click on the chat icon. Town meeting members will immediately be called upon if they have a point of order or are calling the question. As a reminder, amendments to warrant articles will not be accepted via the chat feature. Finally, do not use the chat feature to submit requests for technical assistance, to make comments about warrant articles, or to engage in any side conversations with the chat monitor. If you do require technical assistance, please contact tm@brooklinema.gov or 617-879-3110 and identify yourself as a Brookline Town Meeting member. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a closed caption button labeled CC. Tonight's meeting will be closed captioned to make the proceedings more accessible to town meeting members, guests, staff, and members of the public watching on BIG. Anyone who would benefit or enjoy seeing the closed captions is invited to utilize this functionality. To see captions, click on the CC button, then select Show Subtitles. To turn the captions off, click the CC button again. There is no requirement that you use or do not use the caption feature. Once again, if you encounter any technical problems during tonight's town meeting session and require assistance, you should contact tm@brooklinema.gov or call 617-879-3110 and identify yourself as a Brookline Town Meeting member. Finally, I know there are a number of town meeting members who have not currently been admitted to the waiting room. We are in the process of checking those town meeting members in, and they will be admitted in the next couple of minutes. With that, Madam Moderator, I turn it back to you.
Thank you in absentia, Ben. Okay, now, Pursuant to the acts of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that have authorized remote participation in representative town meetings due to the continuing COVID health emergency, we will be holding this special town meeting virtually. Heather Hamilton has moved that we hold this special town meeting virtually, and it has been seconded by Dennis Doughty. We will now take a vote because town meeting must approve whether or not to hold it virtually, and you will also get the chance to practice voting. The screen will come down on your computers, and you will then have 45 seconds. Again, we are checking out some difficulties. Right now, the question has been asked, how do we choose recusal? There is no way to do that right now. You would abstain. That's the closest you can get. Okay, we are ready for the vote. Yes. Okay, the voting period has expired.
We have 231 yes, 6 no, 6 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with 231 yeses, 6 nos, and 6 abstentions. We are now going to move on to some preliminary motions. Most of you are aware via email that these will be moving various articles around. The first motion is made by Ms. Hamilton and seconded by Mr. Doughty to defer Article 2 relating to collective bargaining to be the first item to be discussed at the November 29th meeting of town meeting. The vote can begin now. Yes. Okay, the voting period is over.
224 yes, 2 no, 14 abstentions.
Okay, the results are 224 people voted yes, 2 no, 14 abstentions. The motion passes. The second motion relates to Articles number 11 through 13, all of which deal with demolition issues and design review related to demolition. The motion is to defer hearing these arguments or these items until November 17th. It has been moved by Mr. Lynn Jones and seconded by Ms. Roberts. We will now have a vote. Articles 11 to 13.
Also have all first
Okay. Oh. Okay, thank you.
There's two people, and I'll tell you who they are when they're done.
Okay.
Okay, and Jonathan Fine,
Jonathan Fine, what is your vote? And identify yourself by your precinct too, please.
Yes, I vote yes.
What is your precinct?
13, precinct 13.
Donald Warner,
And Mr. Warner, how do you vote and what is your precinct? Have you unmuted yourself?
so move on.
Okay, yes, for now we will move on.
228 yes. 5 no. 11 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with 228 votes for the motion, 5 against the motion, and 11 abstentions. The next article, rather the next motion, is to defer Article 15, which has to do with caps on marijuana retailers, to be heard as the second item on November 29th. It has been moved by Mrs. Susan Park and seconded by Ms. Levin. Drop the vote, please.
Jonathan Fine,
Mr. Fine? How do you vote?
Jonathan Fine, precinct 13, voting yes.
okay? There's 225 yes. 3 no. 13 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with 225 votes yes, 3 votes no, and 13 abstentions. Next, we have a motion to move the order in which 2 of the articles submitted by the Zero Emissions Board will be heard. Rather than hearing them sequentially, the motion is to move Article 23 to be heard immediately after Article 20. It is being moved by Mr. Gray and it needs to be seconded. And if someone could volunteer to second it by raising a hand. No raising hands, by contacting the chat monitor. Jane Gilman has seconded it. We- Okay,
Jonathan Fine.
Mr. Fine, what is your vote?
Jonathan Fine, precinct 13, voting yes.
206 yes, 5 no, 13 abstentions.
The motion passes with 206 voting yes, 5 no votes, and 13 abstentions. No, that's not correct. The motion you've just voted on was to move Article 23 to be heard immediately after Article 20. Yes. Okay. The next preliminary non-substantive vote is in a motion to defer discussing Article 39 relating to the golf course to be heard as the first item on November 30th. It is moved by Ms. Goldsmith and seconded by Ms. Duffield. The voting will start now. I'll clarify. Sandy? Sandy, wait.
Jonathan Fine,
Mr.
precinct
Fine?
13. Jonathan Fine, precinct 13, voting yes.
And Donald Warner's back on phone. Donald Warner.
Yes. How do you,
Don Warner, precinct 13, yes.
Okay, 218 yes, 16 no, 14 abstentions.
okay, the motion passes with 214 yeses, 16 nos, and 14 abstentions. My understanding is that the title of the previous slide said that there was a motion to move Article 23 after Article 15, which was incorrect. So can we take a break for 1 second so I can confer with my colleagues about the best action to take to address this?
You want me to?
Oh. So the explanation is probably more complicated than the mistake, but because there are motions that are not being moved between 15 and 20, the effect is the same, and Article 23 will be heard immediately after Article 20. Okay. Article 23 will be heard immediately after Article 15. Thank you. So regardless of whether it's stated 20 or 23, the result is the same. Okay, we are now going to start the special town meeting. Article 1 relates to unpaid bills. It is not being moved by the petitioner. Oh, excuse me. Okay. We are, wait, we have not. We have some persnicketyness here, so, okay. We will adjourn the first special town meeting and convene the second town meeting. The first article at the second town meeting is Article 1, which is budget amendments for the year 2023. It is being moved by Ms. Hamilton, seconded by Mr. Doughty. The motion can be found on page 1 through 7 and 1 through 8 of the special town meeting documents, as well as the charts there too. The amendments are made to balance the budget. I call on Ms. Hamilton first to speak.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Heather Hamilton speaking for a unanimous select board. Each spring, town meeting votes on the annual budget. Each fall, there are adjustments we need to vote on because there are some changes. The good news is we have more money than expected. The bad news is town meeting left us with an unbalanced budget, which took some of our flexibility away. Let me break down some of the details supplied by our hardworking staff. State aid as well as local receipts came in higher, about $1.1 million. $300,000 of that needs to address mandates and other restricted expenses. The first of which is to resolve the unbalanced budget from May to allocate additional funds for sidewalk repair, which was about $147,000. $60,000 of it is restricted because it is for the opioid settlement funds. $85,000 of it needs to go to advertising in the Globe, fees raised to meet town mandate and state statutes. That leaves us with $859,000 to be split between the town and school departments. $344,000 will be used for the town, including Metro Mayor membership at $15,000, updating the town meeting voting system at $66,000. And as part of the Select Board's budget summit held in September, the board would like to address competitive wages and salaries. So we are proposing to allocate $264,000 in our collective bargaining fund. The schools will receive $515,000. Questions on how they intend to break this down can be directed to either the school committee or superintendent. Additional actions under this budget amendment, the town meeting should be made aware. The town receives annual revenue from the assessment on transportation network companies, otherwise known as TNCs, to fund transportation projects. This amount is $84,000 and will be spent on projects recommended by Transportation Board. In 2021, Brookline finally passed the Community Preservation Act, and those funds will require reserve amounts. The Community Preservation Act Committee is still assessing needs and will have more recommendations in time for the annual town meeting. The town is seeking to increase the bond authorization for the Murphy, $350,000, and Robinson, $275,000 playgrounds. We have the bids in hand and need to take advantage so costs don't increase further. The town is seeking to accelerate the bond authorization for engine number 4. Approximately $800,000. It takes 2 years to build instead of just 1 year. We want to keep on the replacement schedule and avoid any costly delays. For all these worthy expenditures, please vote favorable action. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamilton. We will now hear from Advisory Committee Chair Dennis Doughty.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dennis Doughty, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3, and Chair of the Advisory Committee, speaking for a unanimous Advisory Committee recommending favorable action on Article 1. You heard the summary of the expenditures from Select Board Chair Hamilton. The Advisory Committee agrees with all of these allocations. I would like to take this opportunity to emphasize a few observations from our report, which I hope you've read. First and most notable is the $147,000 to balance the budget. As I'm sure you will recall, the Advisory Committee, while supportive of the Sidewalk Safety Initiative, was opposed to the budget amendment at the annual town meeting, which left the budget out of balance, and we are happy to see this rectified. During our discussions on this budget adjustment, we were concerned about the increased costs of the two playgrounds, but became convinced that moving forward with the planned improvements is appropriate. And finally, the Advisory Committee was strongly supportive of the appropriation for the replacement of fire engine number 4. And by a vote of 19-0 with no abstentions, the Advisory Committee recommends favorable action on warrant Article 1.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from Mr. Lescolier. David Lescolier.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Moderator, David Lescolier, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 11, and a member of the Community Preservation Committee. I want to add a little bit more information in addition to what Select Board Member Hamilton provided. I'm speaking about item E of the warrant Article 1, which reads, appropriate community preservation funds as voted by the Preservation Act Committee. Under the Community Preservation Act, Brookline derives revenue from 3 sources: a 1% Community Preservation Act surcharge on the property tax, matching funds from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Community Preservation Trust account, and any which is distributed to each CPA community each year, and also interest on the funds in our accounts. The CPA law requires the town meeting appropriate at least 10% of the CPA revenue to the 3 allowed purposes under the Act: community housing, parks and open space, and historic preservation. Up to 5% may be appropriated each year for staff and administration. The CPA law mandates that the town create and the Select Board appoint a Community Preservation Committee, and that this committee create and adopt, after a hearing, a community preservation plan. The committee is currently drafting Brookline's plan and which integrates every relevant existing town plans into our CPA plan. The CPA plan will provide guidance for town departments and others seeking CPA funds, spelling out goals, objectives, and priorities, and provide information about the process for submitting and reviewing proposals and a schedule geared to the deadline for submitting recommendations in time for the town meeting warrant. A very important point: town meeting must ultimately vote the appropriations of CPA funds, but only to eligible projects the Community Preservation Committee has recommended. Town meeting may reduce or reject a project, but cannot increase funding above the CPC recommendations. Any additional funds remain unappropriated and are available for future appropriation. Unspent funds accumulate year by year. The Community Preservation Committee voted to recommend that 10% be appropriated to community housing, 10% to parks and open space, and 10% for historic preservation, and 5% for administrative support for fiscal 23. After a hearing on October 3rd, by unanimous vote, the committee urges town meeting to vote favorable action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now take a vote on approving the amendments to the budget. And we need a 2/3 vote to pass it. This is special town meeting, the second special town meeting. Article 1, main motion, yes.
Jonathan Fine.
Mr. Fine, how do you vote?
Jonathan Fine, Precinct 13, voting yes.
Mr. Warner,
Don Warner, Precinct 13, yes.
All right, we got 246 yes. 0 no. 5 abstentions.
can't be, I will not hear it now. I am going to say that the motion passes. The votes are 246 votes yes, 0 no votes, and 5 abstentions. I will now hear what the point of privilege is, which would never interrupt a vote. Mr. Friedman, what is your point of privilege?
My point of privilege is that I was in queue to ask a question. I was told I was in queue, and you went ahead and did the vote without calling on me.
I did not, all I saw was your name, and I did not know.
I had written in the queue that I had a question, which is the procedure you outlined when this would happen.
That is true.
I'm not questioning the vote, but I'd like to be able to still ask my question.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Friedman. I understand your frustration, but perhaps you can ask your question.
My
And-
question is on what we just voted on, one of the specific numbers.
It'd actually be a point of order, not a point of privilege.
Well, according to
okay.
Sandy Gadsby, there are no points of order.
Nope.
I had put my name in the queue to ask a question. I'd like to be able to ask the question
Okay,
and
I will let you
hopefully
ask
get
the
an
question.
answer. My
And an
question
answer to
is,
Carolyn, wait. Carolyn Thal has asked when STM Article 3 will be moved, and that was not a question I was going to address, but it will be after Mr. Friedman's question is answered. We will then move past motion or 2 because it's not being moved, and then to Article 3. But Mr. Friedman, please ask your question.
thank you. Chair Hamilton mentioned a certain amount of money that was going to fix the voting apparatus for when we meet in person. When we last met in person 3 years ago, the voting apparatus was all working fine. When this came before the advisory committee, there was nobody there to explain to us exactly what was wrong with the voting clickers and why they needed replacement. I'm asking the question, is there somebody here now who can explain to town meeting why we're spending tens of thousands of dollars to improve or fix a voting system that was working perfectly fine the last time we used it?
Mr. Kaufman, the town clerk, will answer that question.
Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Moderator. This was a request that came because of the impending move back to
We can't hear
in-person.
you. Oh, they can?
Apologies. Because of the impending move back to in-person and then potentially a hybrid town meeting. The clicker technology that we used prior to going to remote town meeting at this point has reached the end of its useful life. It is no longer being supported by the company that makes it. Additionally, we actually do not have enough clickers to accommodate the additional 15 town meeting members from the new precinct. So it's going to be necessary to adopt a new technology for our voting systems, and the recommendation for the tablets came jointly from the town clerk's office and the IT department as a system that can be accommodating to an in-person, to a hybrid, or in the event that we have to go back to a fully remote situation, that it can accommodate all three of those options.
Thank you. And it's my understanding the hybrid is currently illegal.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move on. And there is no motion being made under Article 2, so we will move on to Article number 3 of the Special Town Meeting 2. Article 3, the main motion consists of a substitute motion. It is a resolution regarding trash management made by Mr. Lynn Jones and seconded by Mr. Ishak. The first speaker on the list I have is Mr. Sandman.
Here we go. Excuse me, Madam Moderator, I need to get my document in the right place. There we go. Mike Sandman speaking for the Select Board on Special Town Meeting 2, Article 3. Article 3 began life as a budget amendment that failed to specify where the necessary funds should come from, but gave specific directions for rat control that would have limited the flexibility of the Health Department and the DPW. The Select Board is very pleased to see that the amendment evolved into a resolution. Meanwhile, town staff has looked at how best to use our resources and has come up with a plan to use a new form of rat traps that help us identify the pattern of infestation and monitor changes in that pattern, among other things. And you'll hear more about that in a few minutes. Many of us have seen the rat infestation problem firsthand. I've had a rat run across my feet as I was going up the steps into my condo building. Some residents have seen far worse. This resolution is a good indicator of how upset we all are. Just as we live with wild turkeys, we live with rats, a much less welcome form of urban wildlife. The closing of restaurants at the start of the pandemic disrupted where rats had the easiest access to food. That pushed them into residential neighborhoods, and they remain with us. We in just about every urban community around the country have a rat problem. We're not alone, and as long as there are rats anywhere in the Boston area, there will be rats in Brookline. This resolution and what we're doing at a practical level will help, but it will take time, months, if not years, and we hope for your patience. With that caution, the Select Board unanimously recommends favorable action on Article 3.
Thank you, Mr. Sandman. We will now hear from Public Health Commissioner Sigal Rice, or Reese. I look forward to finding out the correct pronunciation.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Sigal Reese, Director of Public Health and Human Services. And I'd like to update the body on our actions on the rodent response plan. This is taken right out of the plan. It's our chart on the short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions that the task force, which is an internal working group of departments involved with rodent enforcement and control. We've convened the group together, and then myself and Commissioner Galentine drafted a memo to our town administrator, who then relayed the information to the Select Board. So I'd like to update the body on our progress on the plan. As Select Board Member Salmon indicated, we have executed the contract with Modern Pest, which is that first one on the list there, with our pest control specialist. And those boxes, which I'll get into a little detail in a minute here, are going to be deployed November 28th, so very soon. We're still in the process of procurement with the food safety sanitation consultant, which will help us work with those restaurants on those contributing factors in the hotspot areas. The rodent resource webpage has been launched and the link is there, but you can find it under the health department and under environmental health. That is still definitely a work in progress, and we hope to really get some feedback on that and continue to evaluate and put up pertinent information. One of the major changes we have already implemented, again, in collaboration with Public Works, is the Brookline Online system now has been restructured to really make submitting rodent complaints much easier. And that will sort of be the main repository and also allow us to track that data on complaints a lot better. The purchase of the big bellies is underway. And Public Works has begun a procurement on that also. And then as we were submitted it was already completed, but just want to note that the outdoor dining regulations were also updated really to clarify the rodent control requirements. We've also made a lot of progress on the midterm objectives that we had outlined, particularly around revising solid waste regulations. Commissioner Gallantan and I actually met this morning to go over another draft version. And we're really hoping to clean that up and start to gather input from more external stakeholders as well. And one of the other targets that we had in our midterm was the community outreach with designing and providing good information in the form of door hangers. We've heard from a lot of neighboring communities that that's a good way to get information out, not only on prevention and what residents can do, but also let them know that we're investigating the area. And then outlined in the last box here are some of the long-term objectives, which is really subject to the future budget process. I was asked to just give, next slide, please. I was asked to just give a little information on what the modern pest control system looks like. So this is what they call a smart box. It's about the size of, there'll be some more pictures to give you a little perspective on the size, but about the size of a small shredder. There'll be 45 of these boxes deployed again on the 28th of this month, and they can be moved as needed. So they can catch up to several rodents and kill with an electric shock. There are some sensors on it for weather and to see if it's broken. And every time there is a hit in activity, it does send a signal to their network and captures the data. Next slide, please. And this is the pipe system. There will be 5 of these systems deployed throughout the community. These actually go in the sewer pipe and do the same thing. So they don't store the deceased rodents, but they do send a signal whenever time there's a hit. So again, tracking not only reducing the population, but tracking activity and hopefully tracking a decrease in activity. Next slide, please. So some of the common questions that we get, one of the things is it is rodenticide free because it does use an electric shock. They are battery operated. It does not attract other pests. The bait they use is really attractive for rats in particular. So other rodents such as chipmunks and squirrels and rabbits will not be attracted to the bait. It is protected, so you can't really, you have to go pretty far in to activate the electric shock. It actually elevates the rodent up before it shocks it. So there's no issue with injury or someone sticking their hand in the box. And the really great information is that's going to provide us with some really needed data. Right now, the only thing we really capture are complaints, and that's how we dictate our hotspots. But this will show us of the actual rodent activity, which of course will probably be correlated to that. But it will help us also deploy our resources better. So in the areas where we're getting a lot of catches and seeing a lot of activity, we can redirect our efforts as far as pest control in public areas, enforcement on solid waste, and working with our food establishments in the area to make sure they're being very vigilant and not creating any harborage situations. And one more slide. And this is some of the material from the website. Some of it is still pending and still in the works. We're still really working on our mapping displays. But as you see, we're up and running on Brookline Online, and there's some great information about rodent prevention in your property. And also there'll be some information that really outlines the process and what happens when complaints come in, sort of understanding the multi-pronged and lengthy process that we do with investigation and enforcement. And that should be the end.
Okay, we have several questions. And unless they say otherwise, I am going to assume they are directed to you, Ms. Reese. Vina Priestley, you have a question?
Hi, Vina Priestley, Precinct 4. I actually have like 3 similar questions. So my first question is, do the rodents stay in that device? And if so, how often do they get emptied out? Because we do also have like wild coyotes. I just want to know if the rodent stays in that device, and then, yeah, how often is that device cleaned out if they are staying in there?
Moderator, would you like me to go ahead and answer that?
Yes, all these questions right now are directed to you. If it is something you don't know or need to get the answer back to the questioner, then that is fine. It may be a technical question you don't have the answer to on hand.
Sure, no, I can answer that. Yeah, so the device can hold up to, the boxes can hold up to 5 rodents, and there's a signal sent every time there's a kill. So the contractor will come out and empty that. It is secure against either human tampering or animal tampering. But it can hold up to 5, and they will come and empty it when it needs to be.
Awesome. And then this is great, because the other issue I have is that sometimes I do find dead rodents, like random places, like outside. Like we had one on Brookline Ave for 3 days, and I called Brookline Public Works to pick it up, and they didn't until the 3rd phone call. So who's in charge of those? Like, you know, when we do find these animals that have eaten the bait and then have passed away and are just left out, like whose responsibility is that? Is that Brookline Public Works? Who should we be calling?
Yep, so this system doesn't involve bait, and that it does contain it within the box. But as far as dead rodent complaints, that's actually one of the reasons why we want to direct all rodent complaints to Brook Online, is that depending on what it is, whether it be related to solid waste or a dead rat report, sighting, and all, we can filter them through Brook Online. So I would encourage anybody that has any type of rodent complaint to funnel it through Brook Online, and then it will be deployed to the correct department. In that case of a dead rodent, and I think Commissioner Downtown is here, but that would be Public Works.
Thank you.
Okay, Ann Weaver? Nope, she withdrew. Okay, George Abbott White.
Good evening, George Abbott White, Precinct 9. Thank you very much for your presentation and for attending to this problem. So I have a couple of questions. The going electric, I think, it's very good that we're doing that. I think we know that using poison is a good way to kill animals that you don't want to kill, including people's pets. So my first question to you is, are we providing information, or do we have agreement among Brookline citizens not to use poison? Is that something that we can provide information to people?
That isn't part of the rodent response plan, but I think if we have that under sort of our best practices, and we always recommend working with licensed pest control, and that using integrated pest management, and really any rodenticide or poison is a last resort, and that there are much better ways to reduce population and practice exclusion, and really having a management plan on rodent control. Just using poison is not a solution.
Yeah, right. Second question is, since it seems to be clear that not securing garbage is a good way to keep these guys well fed, is there some provision that various, say, restaurants or fast foods, folks that are generating a fair amount of grease and other tasty stuff, are they on board with what we're trying to do?
That has been one of the challenges for my department, is keeping up with the ongoing enforcement for food establishments and their solid waste, and also their grease receptacles and any other conditions that might lead to rodent harborage. So that's the second contract that we're still in the process of procurement, to bring in a contractor to really work hand in hand with those food establishments to help them come up with standard operating procedures, and identify those contributing factors that might be in their establishment. In addition to that, what we're working on within that scope of service is to also gather more data. So understand in these hotspot areas how many contributing factors we can identify, and then reduce those contributing factors. Again, hopefully reducing the population also, the rodent population.
Okay, we have a question from Mr. Wang.
All right. Yeah. My name is A1 Wang, precinct 8. So I have a question. It's like, not because right now this is only from the town, right? So if any condo like other resident, they would like to join, for example, like can they like purchase certain thing with the same program under the town? So maybe can have certain kind of a discount and working with the town all together instead of just like have the town to order 45 or something. Maybe like some of us might want to like chip in together so we can kill the rodent faster instead of keep it a long time stuff, right? So is any program maybe we can consider to put in the town and then like offer this one for the resident to join?
I think that's a great point, and I don't remember if I said in my presentation, but I should say this is in addition to all the other things that we continue to do, and that both the town side and private residents need to continue their pest control in these areas, that this is in addition to. But as far as we've had some communities sort of gather together to coordinate their pest control, and I'm sure Modern wouldn't mind working with residents too. But there are obviously other vendors out there that have similar type of systems, not necessarily this exact system, but that use different technologies more than just baiting and trapping. Like I said, we always say that you should hire a pest control company that uses IPM, integrated pest management practices. But that would be up to individual private residences.
Okay, Connor Sheehan is next.
Hi, Connor Sheehan, Precinct 10, town meeting member. I'm curious for these boxes, are they known to catch any other animals other than rats? I'm specifically thinking mice, squirrels. What else is going to get caught in the dragnet of these?
So mice might be attracted to similar bait as rats. They use a specific bait that attracts rodents, rats and mice. Squirrels, chipmunks, rabbits are not going to be attracted to the same type of, and by bait, I mean it's not poison. It's just the bait to attract the rodent into the box, and then they get elevated and electrocuted. Like I said, no rodenticide used. But they said very rarely do they see anything besides, in this case, we're targeting rats, so they'll use the rat bait, the best rat bait they have, which, just for humor, is barbecue chicken, by the way.
Jocelyn Murphy.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn Murphy from Precinct 16. I mean, I'm deeply aware of the significance of this problem and the angst that it's causing so many people. I haven't experienced, in my neighborhood, I haven't experienced this, but I do remember when there was actually a rat in my parents' house on Clinton Road, which caused quite a lot of activity in the house. But I'm a little bit troubled by the electrocution aspect of this. I mean, it seems to me that delivering a 16-second electrical shock to an animal is very inhumane. You know, as I understand it, the rat populations, you know, if you simply kill them off, they come back with a greater population, because that's, you know, that's part of the way that they procreate. And so from what I understand, the best way of getting rid of rats is removing the food source. So was any consideration given to addressing removal of the food source, the trash problem, before deciding to implement, you know, what I consider to be an inhumane method of extermination?
Yes, definitely. One of the main factors of integrated pest management is practicing exclusion and reducing any harborage. So identifying contributing factors such as food sources, water sources, harborage areas that they might want to burrow and nest, and addressing those issues also. This is, again, just one piece of a multi-pronged approach. But it's a great technology that will provide us with data and also reduce the population.
Okay, I am going to go back to the list of people who signed up to speak. We will then return to some questions, so I would not go far away, Ms. Reese. Marcus Penzel.
Okay, I'm trying to get here. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Hello, I am Mark Penzel, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2, speaking for a unanimous advisory committee, which by a vote of 22-0 with no abstentions, urges favorable action on warrant Article 3. As you've heard, this warrant article is now a resolution that urges our town to devote more resources to trash management and rodent control in order to better address Brookline's major and growing rat infestation problem. The resolution recognizes that this problem poses serious public health and sanitation threats, creates property damage, and reduces the quality of life of many Brookline residents. Complaints of rat sightings in Brookline received by the DPW and the health department have increased by over 300% since 2019, according to these departments. And during the late spring and early summer of this year, many town meeting members were contacted by frightened and increasingly desperate constituents demanding that the town do more to reduce the infestation. We learned of porches and driveways covered in rat feces, rats in plumbing, rats causing thousands of dollars damage to a car engine. Just today, a town meeting member alerted me that he had heard from residents who, despite spending thousands of dollars on services and equipment and exclusion barriers, still can't let their children and pets play in their yards. While the resolution thanks town staff for what they have been doing to address this problem, which includes the recent development of the town's rodent control action plan and the reallocation this fiscal year of roughly $200,000 in ARPA funds to rodent control, it also acknowledges that much more needs to be done. It urges that the fiscal year 24 budget include additional funding for rodent control and trash management measures, and calls for a variety of other measures, including greater coordination with Boston, more stringent regulations related to solid waste disposal and rodent control, and increased fines, fees, and penalties to encourage compliance and to increase revenue for town efforts to combat the rat crisis. The resolution makes clear that the proliferation of rats is an urgent problem that has been on the back burner too long, and that town meeting needs to send a strong message to decision makers that it wants the town to make this a priority now and a budget priority in future budgets. In our hearings, the heads of the DPW and Segal Reese both emphasized that addressing the town's rat problems would require a multi-pronged approach that included more than the purchase of new equipment. They spoke of the need to update regulations, to provide better enforcement, and to educate both businesses and residents on how each can do their part to reduce the town's rodent infestation. There was general agreement that the town's newly adopted rodent control action plan was a welcome first step in the town's increased efforts to combat the rat infestation problem, but there were concerns expressed that this serious problem might not get the funding it needs in the town's fiscal year 24 and future budgets. Some of these longer budgetary needs include hiring an inspectional services and code enforcement supervisor and a trash packer operator, and purchasing additional big belly trash bins, a small garbage truck with a toter lift, and a vehicle for the enforcement supervisor. Annual costs for these measures are estimated to total over $280,000, plus one-time costs of $180,000. And funding for these measures will need to be provided for in the fiscal year 24 budget or through other sources. So if you think the town has been doing enough, you'll vote no. However, if you believe that our town should do much more, a yes vote will send a strong message that town meeting recognizes the severity of Brookline's rat infestation problem and supports a robust and comprehensive effort to combat it, including increased funding for town departments on the front lines of this fight, tougher regulations and penalties, greater coordination with Boston, and improve compliance by businesses, restaurants, property owners, managers, and residents with the town's sanitation regulations. For all these reasons, the advisory committee unanimously urges you to vote favorable action on warrant Article 3. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now listen to the petitioners, Mr. Ishak and Mr. Lynn Jones, who have 5 minutes. Oh, there is a motion to call the question. So we will vote on that motion. It must be passed by a 2/3 majority. Oh, God, yes. Okay. Lined up to speak, we have Mr. Ishak and Mr. Lynn Jones, Mr. Harris, Mr. Margolis, Mr. Richmond, Mr. Warren, Mr. Ananian. Ms. Zimmerman has a question. Martin Yassin has a clarifying question about rat population. Liz Linder has a question, and Jane Gilman has a question about pending DPH regulations. So they are waiting, and we will now vote on whether or not to call the question and vote on the main motion. Fine.
This is Jonathan Fine from Precinct 13. My internet is back on and I voted.
Thank you. Mr. Anyone?
60 yes, 77 no, 10 abstentions.
Okay. The motion passes. There was a point of order made by Mr. Sean Lynn Jones, which may be moot by now, but what is your point?
I have 2 points of order, Madam Moderator. I'm Sean Lynn Jones, Precinct 1. My first point of order was that the motion for the question was out of order because you had already recognized Mr. Ishak and myself. My second point of order is that it takes a 2/3 majority to pass a motion for the question. And I'm not sure if that received it. I couldn't quite tell. I saw 65%. But you had recognized us as speakers, saying our names and asking us to speak prior to entertaining the motion for the question. And you can review
No, I
the
believe
recording.
I believe you are right. I believe that calling the question is not one of the motions that can interrupt a speaker. So I am going to invalidate the vote that was just taken. Let you and Mr. Ishak speak, and then we will vote again on whether or not to call the question.
Thank you.
I beg your pardon? They are the petitioners are deciding. Yes, I think Mr. Ishak is starting.
Good evening, Anthony Ishak, Precinct 1 Town Meeting member. Before I start the presentation, I would just like to take a moment and thank all the department heads who have worked with us on this resolution, including DPW, Health and Human Services, our new town administrator, and parks and open space. Next slide, please. Sorry, thank you. So many of us are aware of the damage that rats can cause. We've already mentioned them by previous speakers, but I want to highlight two particular points. One, the thousands of dollars that are spent on electrical wiring, whether that may be in cars, as was previously mentioned, or in having to redo landscaping to take down burrows that had developed and to build fences, along with the other impact on our town, such as possible damage to our reputation. We need to keep in mind it's not only our residents and neighbors that encounter rats, but visitors to Brookline who use our businesses and restaurants. Next slide, please. This is just to highlight that obviously the infestation is widespread, impacting North Brookline, South Brookline, businesses, restaurants, condos, homes, public housing, all sorts. Next slide, please. So where are the rats coming from? 60% were related to the commercial district, and we recognize that, and construction is also mentioned. The reason that this one article initially targeted parks and open space is because this is a problem that can be addressed through town meeting, which is allocation of resources and funds. Construction and restaurant enforcement, as was previously mentioned, can occur without town meeting's consent. These are powers that our Health and Human Services and DPW, among other departments, already have, and they can pass actions that will be quicker implemented than having to go through town meeting. Next slide, please. So why is the problem so severe? Construction exposing pipes and rat highways. It's exposing their homes. Rats live underground. There's a need for better enforcement of construction sites, and particularly locked waste bins. Rats traditionally don't go very far. They usually stay within about 100 yards. So rats don't commute from other areas. Where they develop a home is usually where food sources are. So if we're able to cut off food sources, whether that might be dumpsters or food disposed of improperly, that will help with decreasing rats. And that is a problem that we currently have with outdoor dining, which is already being addressed with an updated policy. But we also know that this is also occurring in our parks due to increased utilization from COVID, changing exercise routines, increased dining out, socialization, dog walkers taking their dogs, and then also yoga classes occurring there. So it is a problem that impacts a lot of people. Again, warmer winters might possibly be contributing. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So what would help? Well, there was a ARP round one fund request in the spring that was placed, and this is where we identified our numbers prior to changing it to a resolution. It identified a need for 2 positions, compacting trash vehicle, big belly, and rat resistant bins. Currently, rats can gnaw through plastic bins, so this is one of the reasons we prioritized these particular containers, along with the fact that there's about a 40 bin identified list of high impact areas where this could impact it. We felt that this was a fiscally responsible request because these are things that are already needed by the town. We were just expediting their movement forward. It was also environmentally friendly and more humane. Next slide, please. So the rodent control action plan has previously been highlighted. I'd just like to highlight the middle column, which is what would occur over the next 1 year or so, and particularly the request for funding these resources, particularly in the setting that our town has grown by 8%. Next slide. So this should be considered a plan. It's just the beginning. This resolution says we should execute the plan by prioritizing these needs, not only through our budget, but any available funds that come about through ARPA, the CPA, or any other funds. Infrastructure is a basic role of local government, and we need to make sure we're taking that action. The town has to make sure we have the resources to dispose of trash correctly, not only by educating our residents and neighbors, but also by making sure that we address our basic infrastructure. As local government, it is not only our responsibility, but our duty to address this with the budget planning process. So it is with that that I ask that you please vote favorable action on the resolution, support funding the rodent control action plan in fiscal year 24 and beyond. Thank you.
Sean Lynn Jones, Precinct 1. I just want to thank a few people. Thank you to Mr. Ishak for bringing this warrant article forward and doing the work to get it on the warrant. Thanks in particular to among the many town staff who've worked on this, to Commissioner Galantine, Director Reese, and Town Administrator Carey for pulling together the rodent control action plan and being very responsive when there was a great need. When we started this process, we didn't know quite how severe the rat problem was in Brookline, but we've heard from people who can't use their backyards due to rats, rat urine, and rat feces, people who constantly hear rats scurrying around inside their walls, people who have rats run across their feet in their homes, and people who've had to spend thousands of dollars to repair their cars after the rats have eaten the wiring under the hood. That's why we're doing this. That's why we've persisted. Please support the resolution, and please do everything you can to fight the rat infestation, and check out the new rodent resource webpage on the town website. But most important, please support future funding for rodent control. You've heard the advisory committee speaker, Mr. Panzel, outline how important that is, and that's the message I hope you remember at the end of this long debate. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've had another motion, not surprisingly, to call the question. I'm entertaining that motion, and we will now vote. It has to pass. Oh, God. All right. My apologies again. Okay, the people who are currently waiting to speak are Mr. Harris, Mr. Margolis, Mr. Richmond, Mr. Warren, Mr. Ananian, Mr. Yassin, Ms. Linder, Ms. Gilman, Ms. Wu, Ms. Greenwald, Mr. Szymanski. Now, we will start voting on the motion to call the question. A 2/3 majority is required. Yes.
Okay. 197 yes, 44 no, 10 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with 197 votes yes, 44 no, and 10 abstentions. We will now vote on the article, which is the resolution regarding trash management. It is found on pages 3 to 4 of the special town meeting 2 documents. It needs a majority vote.
Okay. 239 yes, 4 no, 7 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with a vote of 239 yes, 4 no, and 7 abstentions. Okay, we will now dissolve the special town meeting within the special town meeting and go back to the special town meeting. So the special town meeting is being re-adjourned. And we are first going to move right past Article 1 relating to unpaid bills, which is not being moved. We're moving past Article 2, which is not being moved. We are going to Article 3, which relates to the use of the opioid stabilization fund, and it is found on page 3-2. It's found on 3-2. It is moved by Ms. Ashkenazi, seconded by Ms. Thal. Our first speaker is Ms. Ashkenazi.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator, Miriam Ashkenazi, speaking on behalf of the unanimous Select Board. The opioid crisis has been a century in the making. From Arthur Sackler's first foray into the pharmaceutical and medical advertising business with the invent of Valium to the pain scale that we use today. I personally came of age as a young ER physician during the early days of the opioid crisis and have come face to face with the devastating results. This money is but a drop in the bucket to repair the harm that has been done to those impacted by opioid addiction. Warrant Article 3 asks town meeting to dedicate opioid settlement payments to a special purpose stabilization fund. The town is currently estimated to receive approximately 1.7 million over the next 16 years. The funds are required to be used to supplement and strengthen resources available for substance use disorder prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery efforts. Opioid settlement payments currently go to the general fund. By establishing this fund, we allow the funds to accrue in the stabilization fund until there is a recommendation on an appropriate specific to opioid abuse and use, on an appropriation, specific to opioid abuse and use. This money is restitution, and we have a moral and ethical obligation to use it for what it was intended for what it is intended for. Again, I urge you to vote favorable action.
Ms. Thal.
Carolyn Thal, speaking for a unanimous advisory committee. Because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has mandated that opioid settlement monies be used for substance abuse prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery work, and because warrant Article 3 would create a special purpose stabilization fund to ensure that Brookline's payments are used for that intended purpose, through our Public Health and Human Services Department's Substance Abuse Prevention Division. The advisory committee voted 26-0 with no abstentions and urges favorable action on the motion.
Okay, we have no more speakers, so we are going to go to a vote. The main motion is on page 3-2 of the combined reports. You'll be voting on whether or not to approve the proposed use of the opioid stabilization fund. We need a 2/3 vote for this to pass. The voting will start now. Okay,
242 yes, 1 no, 5 abstain.
motion passes with 242 yeses, 1 no, and 5 abstentions. We now move to Article 4, which is found on page 4-6. It relates to the appropriation of funds to renovate town fire stations and to reconstruct Fire Station number 5. It is moved by Chair Hamilton and seconded by Dennis Doughty. Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you. Heather Hamilton, speaking for a unanimous select board. Last week, voters wisely passed question 5, which sought bond authorization to renovate 5 of our fire stations to accommodate female firefighters, as well as address environmental issues that may be putting the health and safety of our firefighters at risk. In order to carry out the will of the voters, town meeting must also authorize the use of these funds. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Succinct and to the point. Carol Levin. Or Levin, Carol Levin.
Yeah, oh, can you hear me now? Carol Levin speaking for a unanimous advisory committee. As Chair Hamilton noted, on November 8th, the voters of Brookline voted by a vote of 13,381 to 565.59 in favor of ballot question 5, which would exempt from Prop 2.5 the amount required to pay for the bonds issued in order to renovate, remediate, and modernize all of the town fire stations, including the site work and reconstruction of station number 5. Article number 4 provides 2 things. The first is authorizing the town to borrow approximately $65 million to complete this project. And the second is to appropriate or spend the funds to complete this work, which will happen over 5 to 7 years. The advisory committee has been following this project since fiscal year 20 budget cycle and supports this work to both make the town's 5 fire stations safer for all employees, provide equitable accommodations for both men and women employees of the fire department, and so to provide a workspace which will be in conformity with all local, state, and federal safety standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Szymanski has a question.
Hi, Harold Szymanski from Precinct 9. I don't know if Chief Sullivan is with us tonight, but I want to thank the chief for answering some of my questions. Though they were long and tedious, they were certainly late in the asking. He actually responded to me over the weekend, which I appreciate. I also took the opportunity to go and check out some of the firehouses. Very kind firemen there. They showed me all around, and the reality is it mainly really reminded me of my son's fraternity house in North Carolina. I don't say that in a positive way. It wasn't quite uninhabitable, but certainly nothing that you want to show your mother, as was evidenced when we actually visited him in North Carolina. But in any case, I certainly am supportive of this motion and certainly want to see these firehouses renovated. I just have one question in terms of the funding. So I recognize we did a $65 million debt exclusion, except now we're appropriating for 5 discrete projects and over a period of 5 to 7 years. So I'm just somewhat concerned this notion of appropriating for projects that aren't even going to be built for a number of years. We all know what happens with regard to estimates as far as construction goes. So whether it's the chief, whether it's Chairwoman Hamilton, if someone could just walk me through why the decision to appropriate all 5 projects is happening now rather than one at a time.
Ms. Hamilton, do you want to take that, or do you want to turn it over to the chief or the town administrator?
I actually think Melissa Goff might be the right person to answer this question.
Okay.
Plus the prompt. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator. So we are currently, our plan is to borrow for the funds over a series of years. We are looking to design the project first. That's part of the reason why we have these estimates, is that we still need to do some substantial design. We're looking to appropriate the funds for the entirety of the project, but if at any point during the course of the project, town meeting would want to revisit the authorization, there's opportunity to do that. So we feel that the full budget at the current estimates is where we're at. And if we need to revisit, we can provide updates to town meeting as we go along.
Thank you. There's been a motion to call the question, which I am not going to entertain at this time. Bettina Neufein, you have a question?
I do. This is Bettina Neufein, town meeting member from Precinct 1. The language in the warrant article was very specific about the big part of the motivation being to ensure gender equity, but the language that was used throughout the language spoke only about gender equity for women and facilities to accommodate female firefighters. There was no reference made to non-binary people or other gender diverse people who might either be firefighters or want to be firefighters. And this strikes me as a significant omission, particularly if the town is seeking to avoid liability, because gender identity is also a protected class. So my question is whether the town has anticipated this and if there is amended language somewhere addressing this.
Charles Chaz Carey, the town administrator, would like to address this question. Wait,
Evening, Chaz Carey. Sorry.
Okay, unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. Apologies. Chaz Carey, town administrator. Thank you for that question. Yes, that has been considered, and I don't want the discussion surrounding that, you know, given the need for gender equity to disguise or obscure the plan, which is for a truly gender inclusive environment. The firefighters themselves have indicated that their preference now, as opposed to gender segregated housing, is an inclusive gendered environment with individual stalls for restrooms and the opportunity and for you know, appropriate accommodations for people of all genders and all gender expressions. So well, I think, you know, just in terms of how we, you know, in the past have talked about these issues, there's that discussion, and there's particularly the issue now based on how the current firehouses are designed, where there is gender segregation, where there are female or female identifying firefighters. The plan here is for true gender equality and accessibility across the gender spectrum. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Rebecca Stone, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. It's following up on what Bettina and Chaz Carey just talked about. Rebecca Stone, town meeting member Precinct 3, and also member of the Brookline Commission for Women. I personally and the Brookline Commission for Women were both really pleased to see these renovations going forward, to see the question pass on the most recent ballot, because as Mr. Carey just said, they will substantially improve, although it will take a long time, gender equity in the design of our firehouses. which should help us attract more women to the department, which is also a stated goal of the department. But I wanted to ask the chief, since we've been referring to these things that are going to happen, and Mr. Carey just did as well, I wanted to ask the chief to give us some details about what that actually looks like, and what the renovations actually plan for that will accomplish what has been laid out in the goals.
And this is
So-
okay, go ahead.
Chief Sullivan for the fire department. Thank you for that question. The stated goals for our gender equity include facilities for gender neutral bathrooms, which would include it's a new design that new fire stations and renovated fire stations are using to be able to accommodate all genders, which is more of a pod gender neutral bathroom facility, which includes a shower, a sink, a changing area, and a toilet all in one. So there's no specific gender associated with that. All of the sleeping accommodations would be equitable as well, eliminating any segregation that has been done in the past. The locker rooms will also be non-segregated, and it is intended to bring the fire stations into the 21st century, where we can accommodate all people who wish to be firefighters, no matter what their identity is, and that is the goal, and that is the design for each of the fire station renovations.
Okay, there are no more speakers, so we will have a vote on this article. The main motion is on page 4-6 of the combined reports. The issue was whether or not to appropriate funds to renovate the town fire stations and reconstruct Fire Station 5. It needs a 2/3 vote to pass. Voting will start now.
Okay, you have 250 yes, 3 no, 3 abstain.
The motion passes with 250 yes, 3 no, and 3 abstentions. We now move to Article 5. Article 5 can be found on page 5-2 of the combined reports. It is a motion, there is a motion to eliminate the requirement that the select board make recommendations on every warrant article. It is moved by Chair Hamilton, seconded by Ms. Hardebeck. There is also a motion to refer the issue to the Committee on Town Organization and Structure. That motion is also found on page 5-2. It is moved by Mr. Lynn Jones and seconded by Mr. Benka. We will start the discussion with Ms. Hamilton. And from here on out, unless you've been granted special privileges, everyone has 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Hamilton speaking for a unanimous select board. Let me tell you a story about a land where all the decisions are made by volunteers who do this after hours. The work is important and takes up a lot of time. It is often much more complicated than it appears to be and very much thankless. The number of policy proposals offered by petitioners have exploded in recent years. The number of hours spent reviewing them, debating them, amending them, reconsidering them are too numerous to count. Not all of them have a direct impact on the budget or town operations or the town in general. The Select Board is one of many bodies that make a recommendation to town meeting how it should vote on a warrant article. Sometimes we are all in agreement, but sometimes it is a 3-2 split. When I first joined the board over 5 years ago, we would try to get through 4 to 5 articles a meeting to be able to keep up with all the submittals. This usually meant that we were hearing articles that were going to be amended and would be brought back to us a second and sometimes a third time. This was one of the most inefficient things I have seen on the board. On average, it takes us a minimum of 30 minutes to consider any given warrant article with its public hearing. Now multiply that by the number of articles on any given warrant and the number of revisions. When I became chair, I asked, why do we do it this way? I was basically told because we've always done it this way. So this past spring, I floated a proposal to the board and the advisory committee to try to narrow our focus on warrant articles that made sense for us to weigh in on. The board now discusses openly which articles it wants to weigh in on and why. This is posted as the public hearing. What many people don't realize is that when the select board discusses a warrant article and takes a position, staff need to write a report that goes into the combined reports. This is often the same staff that are simultaneously trying to put next year's budget together. The work keeps increasing and the resources keep getting more and more strained. Each warrant is different and each board may be different. I believe it is essential that the select board be given the flexibility and respect to come up with the criteria that it makes sense for that specific set of warrant articles. Town meeting is bombarded with information. I believe it is prudent to be judicious with time and energy. This was my effort to guard against volunteer and staff burnout, as well as cut down on endless repetition. Please vote favorable action on our original article. Please do not support the motion to refer. Why are we kicking this can down the road? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lynn Jones.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm Sean Lynn Jones, Precinct 1, speaking for Unanimous Committee on Town Organization and Structure, which recommends referral of Article 5. CTOS recognizes that it's hard for the Select Board, the Advisory Committee, and town staff to cope with the increasing number of town meeting warrant articles. And maybe the Select Board and Advisory Committee should not have to offer recommendations on articles about US foreign policy or whether to impeach the president and many other topics that are not directly relevant to the town's operations. But CTOS has at least 3 major concerns with Article 5 as it was submitted. Concern number 1, Article 5 might mean the town meeting does not get important advice from the Select Board on key warrant articles. The Select Board is the town's executive branch. It has unique expertise and information, access to staff regarding articles that, for example, include bylaw amendments, budget appropriations, and home rule petitions, as well as the articles that the town's own departments place on the warrant. Input from the Select Board is a key part of vetting this kind of warrant article. Maybe there should be explicit criteria included in the bylaw saying which kinds of articles the Select Board should report on. Concern number 2, Article 5 might mean that there are no public hearings on some warrant articles. Right now, the bylaws require that the Select Board and the Advisory Committee hold at least 1 hearing before taking a vote on a warrant article. If there is no report, no recommendation, and no vote, would there be a public hearing? Public hearings are a pretty important part of the process in this town for petitioners, for the public, and for the whole town meeting process. If the Select Board is not required to report on every article, maybe it should be required to hold a public hearing at least. Concern number 3, Article 5 applies equally to the Select Board and the Advisory Committee, but they have different areas of expertise and knowledge. We should consider whether the bylaws that apply to one should apply evenly to the other. Maybe there's a different list of articles that the advisory committee should be required to report on. Now, these concerns and maybe others require further discussion. In particular, the whole question of public hearings and whether we could revise our requirements for public hearings to make sure that there were public hearings probably go beyond the scope of Article 5. And that's why a referral is necessary, not only to talk more about exactly what the criteria are, but to broaden the focus. There may be a better way to do this, but Article 5 as it stands is too broad, too unclear, and would undermine the process that we have been used to. I think there is a better way. CTOS is willing to consider that. We're not passing the buck. We're willing to refer to ourselves and to come back with a report and most likely a warrant article for the May 2023 town meeting. I hope you'll consider what I've said and support the motion to refer so that we can get this right and have a procedure that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hardebeck?
Good evening, Kelly Hardebeck, town meeting member from Precinct 7, speaking for the advisory committee. The advisory committee reviewed the warrant Article 5 as submitted. As you heard, leading up to the 2022 annual town meeting, the select board piloted a process where the board made recommendations on a limited set of warrant articles. And based on the results of that pilot, the board seeks permanently to have the option of not reviewing every warrant article for town meeting. The current select board has indicated that they will review articles submitted by a town department, board, or commission, all budget amendments, and matters that are topical or potentially controversial. Additionally, the select board chair has implemented a policy that allows any member of the select board to request the board review of specific warrant articles. As you've heard, the number of articles in the warrant has increased dramatically in recent years, and the proposed change allows the select board to focus its attention on articles directly related to its authority. Please join me and the advisory committee in urging favorable action on warrant Article 5.
Thank you. Neil Gordon. Neil Gordon?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Neil Gordon, Precinct 1 town meeting member, a dissenting member of the hardworking volunteer advisory committee, and with Marty Rosenthal, co-chair of Brookline PACs. Transparency and community engagement. How many warrant articles, how many discussions have we had on those subjects? How many positive steps have we town meeting taken in the interest of transparency and community engagement? Article 5 is a step backwards. The select board's proposal is neither transparent nor is it engaging. I suspect the select board plays to a wider audience of Brookline residents than any other town board, committee, or commission. If you want the public to hear you, go to the podium on the 6th floor of Town Hall on Tuesday evening. In that context, petitioners should also be able to tell their story to the select board and to the viewing public. There might even be a public response, that sometimes pesky and time-consuming First Amendment right to petition your government for a redress of grievances. I appreciate that the select board has lots to do, but we can find better ways than this to save the select board some of their precious time. And let's not be lured in by a simple count of warrant articles. It's in the 40s for this town meeting, but how many of them group together? How many are left standing after petitioners relatively early in this process decided not to move their proposals forward? I say the select board should take up every article in the warrant. Every, which doesn't mean some, just as shall doesn't mean may. The select board should hear from petitioners and hear from the public, and they should tell us, town meeting, based at least in part on public input, their thoughts. They're the town's executive, it's their job. In the interest of both transparency and community engagement, I join with Brookline PACs in recommending a vote of no action on Article 5. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. You have 3 minutes.
If I can find the mute button, does that count? for my 3 minutes. Anyway,
It's starting now.
sorry now. Thank you. Marty Rosenthal, Precinct 9. I also am a former select board member when we had slimmer warrants, but we still had many meetings till midnight. And also for Brookline PACs, and Neil has said urges no action. But I have to say I could live with referral to CTOS, especially since I finally retired from it after 3 decades. And by the way, I have to shout out for, I believe, Brookline government's most unsung heroine, Jean Berg, who thanklessly and brilliantly chaired CTOS for more than those 3 decades, actually. So some highlights of what we wrote for PACs, which I hope some of you have seen. Basically, I think this is much ado about nothing but a gross overreaction to mushrooming warrants. And it's downright wrong, evoking to me the otherwise distasteful H.L. Menkins. For every human problem, there's a solution that's neat, plausible, and wrong. My biggest concern is really the public hearing issue, but it's also that the select board wants to find irrelevant to town government many things and issue no recommendation. That I think they're just wrong on that as well. But getting to the public hearing aspect, I think it's unintentionally an insult to our beloved by many, but yes, messy and annoying form of government, which also evokes a less distasteful wordsmith, Justice Brandeis's, the most important office in democracy is the office of citizen. And secondly, there's the fact that Neil mentioned, that the right to petition the government, which is actually from the Magna Carta and is really the historical precursor to the freedom of speech. So even to a rare non-TMM petitioner, but especially to one of us from a co-equal branch of government, they want to say sub silentio, without even hearing from you, we've in an open meeting, but with closed minds, deemed your warrant article to be basically irrelevant to town government. Some examples in this warrant are Article 10, saving trees, 25 to 29, stunningly from their ZAB, about combating climate change, the world's biggest existential threat. 34 to 35, ethics rules that affect when we legislators, including them, can vote here. Shouldn't our town's leaders offer opinions on those? They say to us in the combined reports, the board deemed the experiment a success, as it allowed them to focus on warrant articles that directly affected their work, instead of holding hearings on those that weren't germane to their interests and authority. Very respectfully, that's both separation of powers and it's all about us run amok. Finally, there's a less drastic and more respectful alternative. The board really can set varying time limits for aggregate public comment, depending how many ask to speak. And then they could hopefully not too often say, after a public hearing, the board will not be making a recommendation on article so-and-so. That's not a big burden on the staff to repeat that sentence a few times. So if this is referred and hard to enforce criteria are proposed, I for one will remain skeptical and push for narrow criteria and for a high burden of proof for especially denying a public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Hummel? Amy Hummel?
Thank you.
You have
Amy
3
Hummel,
minutes.
Thank you. Amy Hummel, Town Meeting Member Precinct 12, a member of the advisory committee, but I'm speaking for myself. This warrant, or warrant Article 5, is an ill-conceived idea that undermines our form of town government without actually addressing that issue. And it limits the public's avenues to meaningful participation, especially to the select board whom voters trusted would listen. The pilot embedding of this article are wanting. To this town meeting member, the absence of the select board's voice on some articles last spring didn't feel like a success. And the proposed changes in this article lack sufficient detail and rigorous review, which might have made reasonable adjustments palatable. Thankfully, CTOS has demonstrated leadership and offered a referral motion, providing an explanation for their motion, which is an excellent example of the thorough yet succinct consideration town meeting and the public deserve on every article from their leaders. Both the select board and the advisory committee, who are also impacted, should hear from the public and weigh in on every warrant article. Even if the workload is heavy, and even if some petitioners might prefer a less rigorous vetting, our current process ensures that there are multiple public hearings an evaluation by a sizable number of individuals with relevant areas of expertise, institutional knowledge, and different perspectives, who listen and provide the opportunity to engage in robust conversation, culling weak arguments and ideas in favor of more compelling ones. No town meeting may not always listen. One reason the select board chair gave to CTOS for opting out of some articles, but the current process makes us better and it's worth the work. I have great respect for how much work most select board members do. And it's clear that it's not an easy job, but it is the job, the volunteer job they asked for. Regardless of the number of articles on the warrant, service is the job. Service that should unequivocally include a complete warrant review and report after hearing from petitioners, the public, and discussing the substance in public. In addition to listening to the public, we should all know how our leaders think about these issues before us, and they should represent themselves with their voice and their vote. The select board already doesn't write their own reports. It's part of the reason for divesting themselves from some of this work is that it's too onerous on the staff who does. We can solve those kind of problems without the public losing the attention of our executive branch. When whomever happens to be in charge at the time decides an article isn't a good use of their time. So I'd rather just vote no action, but CTOS is certainly best positioned to vet this issue more thoroughly than has been done. So please vote for referral, and if referral fails, please vote no action. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Daly. Yes?
Thank
What
you.
is the point of order, or who has a point of order? Paul Warren? Mr. Warren, what is your point of order?
Good evening, Madam Moderator. I'm sorry to interrupt. In past town meetings, we had published a list of those who are in the queue to speak, as if we were standing up at the microphone. That is not happening this evening. If you could please direct the chat monitor to publish the list of those who have questions and comments, would be most appreciated. Thank you.
What I can't even see the list. The speaker list goes in chat. I see Alec. I don't know what to tell you. So my understanding is the information is being made available on the chat line. But right now we're going to Nancy Daly. That's the end of the people who have signed up to speak. And then we will go to people who have questions and are apparently listed in the chat room. Okay, Ms. Daly, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Nancy Daly from Precinct 12. I served on the select board for 12 years and on the advisory committee for 8 years before that. And I think it is important for both of those boards to continue to hold public hearings on all the warrant articles and to offer recommendations on them. While insiders know how important the advisory committee subcommittee hearings on warrant articles are, many members of the public are not really aware of them. Everyone, however, is aware of the select board and its importance to the town's governance. The public needs to have its opportunity to tell someone who will listen what their concerns are about warrant articles, and the select board can offer that perspective from the public and from its relationship with the town administrator and department heads. While some articles don't have a major impact on the town budget, they may have an impact on our constituents' pocketbooks. In addition, sometimes one or two select people in the past would take it upon themselves to work with petitioners to make a warrant article more workable. So the process was helpful. While the recommendations of the select board and the advisory committee often are similar, that's not always the case. And town meeting deserves to hear about the issues from both. I realize that lately the warrant has been growing increasingly long, and that makes it a challenge to get through all the articles, but I think it's the duty of the select board to do so. And so I urge you to vote no action or for referral of this warrant article. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daly. The first person I have on my list is Alec Leibovitz, and I would ask the chat monitor, I have 4 names, and apparently there are more. So if you could provide me with a full list of people. Oh, that is it. All right. Alec Leibovitz, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Alec Lebovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. I had a number of questions that pertain to the bylaw as it currently exists and the pilot that was mentioned by Ms. Hardebeck that the Select Board has been undertaking for the last 2 cycles. Under what authority has the Select Board been conducting these pilots? And could this continue if warrant Article 5 is rejected or referred? And if so, then I fail to see why a bylaw change is necessary to achieve the Select Board's aims here.
Actually, that is a question, I believe, for Ms. Hamilton. No, hold on. Be absolutely correct. Town Council Joe Callanan is better able to answer that question. Joe Count.
Okay.
Okay, you're on, Joe.
So our town administrator, Chaz Carey, will answer that question, if you please.
Thank you, Chaz Carey, Town Administrator. In answer to your question, the Select Board has taken the position that at its initial meeting in which it considers which warrant articles to review versus not review in detail, they hold a public hearing on that matter. They run down the list of the warrant articles in question that are in the warrant. They have a discussion on whether or not they will hold further hearings and consideration on the matter. And at that point, they move forward from there with a list of articles for further consideration. I believe at the most recent meeting, there was the opportunity for the public to talk not just about those individual articles, but the procedure in general. I believe Town Meeting Member Frowley spoke about the issue at that juncture and raised concerns similar to concerns being raised here regarding the wisdom of the decision, whether or not it was appropriate from a governance perspective. But ultimately, the decision was in both for last town meeting and this town meeting that there would be a kind of an initial hearing in which the Select Board would consider the full warrant, make a determination on which articles it wished to make further judgment on, and would set those for further public hearing. For the ones to which it did not, then they would be that would be considered, the matter would be closed. And as you can see in your combined reports, it says that the Select Board, after consideration, would not make a recommendation one way or the other on that article. In response to your question, if from a practical standpoint, if this article did not carry, what would change? There's nothing in this article not carrying that would prevent the Select Board from continuing that practice as a matter of practical policy, if that's what their decision is.
I am not going to take the motion to call the question at this point. Vina Priestley has a question.
Hi, Vina Priestley, Precinct 4. So what criteria do you guys have in place that makes it, what warrant articles you will review and what are warrant articles that you won't review? Like, what is that criteria that you guys are using?
In that instance, I would, I'd let the chair of the Select Board discuss that. That's a matter for the Select Board makes an independent determination as to what articles they will take up and why. So if the chair wants to discuss further.
Ms. Hamilton?
So Sorry, I'm having trouble remembering as far back as the spring. But I think this current town meeting, what we decided to use for criteria is anything that is a either the select board or a department sponsored warrant article, anything that is a bylaw change, and anything that really does affect the budget, anything that we assume is going to be very controversial. So last spring, the turf stuff, and this time around, there were a couple of different, the snow and ice warrant article. Certainly, a lot of opinions about that. And then my kind of elastic clause, for lack of a better term, any select board member who wants to make sure that we take up a warrant article, all they have to do is say, I want us to take this up. And so we carved out about half, and we were able to kind of keep pace with all of the warrant articles. And I believe that we're addressing the ones that get the most attention at town meeting. As far as, opportunities to come before, there's always public comment with the select board. And I'll just end my remarks there.
I am not going to entertain the motion to call the question at this time. Mr. Toffel?
Hello, Mike Toffel, town meeting member, precinct 8. I have two questions. One is for the select board. In the explanation of their article, they justified it as the select board seeking to not have to write reports for every article, but their edit to the bylaw exempts not only the select board, but also AC. And I wonder if that was on purpose or an error. That's my first question to the select board, please. And my second question is another cut at Alex Leibovitz's question, but this time it really is a legal question. And the question is the select board currently disobeying the bylaws by choosing on their own volition to not issue a report for every article as the bylaws require? Simply calling it a pilot doesn't seem to me justification for ignoring our bylaws. That's a question for town council. Is this actually illegal? Finally, my opinion is it seems appropriate to allocate this to CTO&S so that we, town meeting, can weigh in on the criteria of which advice, of the advice that AC and select board will be giving us. So two questions, one for the asking about the select board's intent, and the second is a legal question I'm hoping the town council can weigh in. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to, I don't know who drafted the bylaw. So while the select board people decide among themselves who is best able to answer that question, I would like to go to Joe Callanan to answer the question, the legal question of whether or not the select board is currently in violation of existing bylaws or the existing bylaw.
Evening, Joe Callanan, Town Council. Last spring, I was asked about this pilot program, and I told the board that they were not in violation of the existing bylaw because they were holding a public hearing and making a recommendation, even if the recommendation was that they were going to take no action. So the pilot program that is being described is not in violation of the warrant article. And I believe Melissa will be able to answer the question, the first question.
So we'll go to Melissa Goff relating to the drafting of the bylaw and whether or not it was the intent to include the advisory committee in the exception of the requirement to write reports on every article on the warrant.
Good evening, Melissa Goff, Deputy Town Administrator, drafter of the article. Before filing the article, I did run this by the chair of the board and the chair of the advisory committee, acknowledging that the language would impact them. The chair of the advisory committee during the public hearing, I think we talked about that they would not be amending their practices based on the ability to not make recommendations. So it wasn't intended to include them, but the way that it was drafted, they are able to take advantage of this should they choose to. And I think that we had additional language kind of initially drafted, but then knowing that there are a lot of people that like to make some editing on criteria and what the policy of the board would be, we chose to make it simple so that each board would be able to have the discussion and alter the criteria for what articles they take up at every town meeting.
Thank you. Regina Frawley, you have a question? You've disappeared. Ms. Frawley, do you care to speak? Okay. Well, we will then proceed to Natalia Linos, who has a question.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Natalia Linos, Precinct 6. And this question is probably to Chair Hamilton or to someone in the Select Board. I'd like to understand in practice whether this concern about limiting public hearing would have an impact in the sense of in recent years that you've reviewed warrant articles. Has the public really participated in Select Board public hearings, or has it been mostly the petitioners who hopefully would be at town meeting? I'd like to know what we are losing as town meeting by not having a report. Has there been, many people coming from the public that are not petitioners to speak at Select Board hearings in recent, in the last few years, I guess?
Was that a question to Chair Hamilton?
Madam Moderator, I was not unmuted in time. I would like to still speak.
Okay, we'll get to you next, Ms. Frawley, okay? Ms. Hamilton?
Okay, so I'll just, this is Heather Hamilton, the chair of the Select Board. I will say that this is my opinion based on my experience. It really depends on what the issue is, right? Like we were going to hear a lot about rats, and we were going to hear a lot about that, whether it was at the Select Board or if it was at town meeting. I can appreciate the concern about lack of public hearings. I will, but one of the things that happened recently, I was talking to a brand new town meeting member, and I was a little surprised when they asked me if the Select Board voted down the warrant article regarding the swimming pool. And I had to explain to that town meeting member that the Select Board does not vote to take a warrant article off of the warrant. And so one of the things that I hope is accomplished by us picking and choosing is that we actually embolden town meeting to be the one that weighs in. The debate should be happening mostly here. We are one of several advisory boards. If any petitioner wants to come before us, if we, don't take it up, they can have a conversation with us. All they have to do is convince one of the 5 of us to put it before the board. I'm just trying to manage our meetings so that we don't burn ourselves out and we don't burn our staff out.
Ms. Frawley, you had a question, I believe.
Hi, Regina Frawley, town meeting member from Precinct 16. I obviously don't agree with this whatsoever. And if I read it correctly, if it hasn't been changed, it allows them to also have to hear from the public on any warrant article, which is currently another bylaw, that they have to hold at least one meeting. And I believe this will give them the permission to, if it passes, to remove that as well. We're representative town meetings, but we have to go back to our people. The so-called select people are selected. That's all they are. And they're a point of view, and they have a final vote on certain things, but they don't have a final vote on everything. I've been around a long time in town meeting. I've been a journalist in Brookline as well. I like to hear both sides of an issue, and they have frequently disagreed with one another, sometimes with better reasoning, sometimes not so much. So the point is that it allows us to hear a genuine debate between the two major organizations in town, the advisory committee and the select board. And furthermore, most of the petitioners used to get a chance to go to all the different committees, and now they're not even being invited to all of those committees. We're just removing ourselves, just like COVID has done to every other organization, including the schools. We're putting more distance between ourselves and the people who elect us and the consequences of our decision making. We are, as town meeting members, we need to have this information given to us, and we need to be able to represent it and make an informed decision. So I'm against this article, but if it needs to go to DTOS, I'm willing to support that, but I will not vote yes on this article. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Frawley. We have a request to call the question. I am not going to grant that at this time. Mr. Margolis.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. John Margolis, Precinct 7 and Library Trustee. As I understand it, the Select Board now proposes at the beginning of the process to review all of the articles and figure out which ones they need to have a public hearing on and vote formally on and make a comment. That would be very nice if the process didn't last for 6 weeks to 2 months. How many times has an article that didn't seem to be controversial or need much consideration at the beginning of the process turned out to be more complex than noted and believed originally, and to require a great deal of elucidation? It seems to me that the board is taking a very presumptuous position. It is also, I believe, certainly contravening the spirit of the warrant of the bylaw and past practice. It may not be violating the letter, but it's certainly not keeping to the tradition of the select board and town meeting and the AC. I agree with those who say, although with some reluctance, I will vote to refer, but I will vote no action if the motion to refer is defeated. Thank you.
Another motion to call the question. I will entertain this motion, and we will have a vote on whether or not to call the question. The people who are waiting to be heard are Jocelyn Murphy, Wendy Friedman, Mark Penzel, Marty Rosenthal, and Diana Spiegel. Okay, the motion to call the question has to pass by a 2/3 vote. And voting will begin now.
Got 175 yes, 62 no, 11 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with 175 yes, 62 no, and 11 abstentions. So we first vote on the motion to refer the question to the Committee on Town Organization and Structure. Their motion is on page 5-2. As we've been discussing, the main motion is whether or not to eliminate the requirement that the select board make a recommendation on every warrant article. That will not be voted on until, if it is decided that the matter should be referred to the Committee on Town Organization and Structure, the main motion will not be voted on. We will now take a vote on whether to refer the issue to CTOS.
Got 162 yes.
Okay, the motion passes with 162 votes yes, 78 votes no, and 11 abstentions. Since the motion is being referred to CTOS, we will not vote on the main motion. We will now turn to Article 6, which is a non-controversial one, I believe. Article 6, the main motion is found on pages 6-4 to 6-5 of the combined reports. The question is whether or not to accept an easement over property at 51 Bartlett Crescent. It is being moved by Mr. Green and seconded by Mr. Doughty. I look forward to hearing it.
Hi, I'm rising with a point of privilege. I believe that we have started the first town meeting with the town being under the stewardship of Town Administrator Chaz Carey without actually welcoming Chaz and other new town staff to Brookline. So welcome to our new town administrator. We're very pleased to have you.
Moving on. Mr. Green, thank you for that comment, Jesse. Mr. Green, will you please give your presentation on the easement?
Yeah, I had trouble unmuting. I also welcome Chaz to town meeting. I mean, he's been with the town for a few weeks, but never at a town meeting. So, welcome and fasten your seatbelts. So, Bernard Green, member of the select board, speaking for the select board, a unanimous select board on warrant article 5. This is non-controversial, although maybe I can find a way to make it interesting and controversial. This warrant article allows the town through the select board to accept an easement over private property at Bartlett Crescent to enter onto the property and repair and maintain a storm drain. The project is a mixed-use development at Brookline's border with Brookline. It's just south of the Brighton Whole Foods. The town permitted the owner to reroute a storm drain around the building and through the Brookline portion of the project. This helped make the project buildable. In exchange, the owner has agreed to grant this easement. There would be no monetary cost to the town. Rather, the consideration is the town permitting the rerouting of the storm drain. The cost of the town repairing the drain would be charged back to the owner, so the town would incur no repair costs. The easement will attach to the land, so the town will have the right to access the storm drain and repair it and get reimbursed, even if the property is sold to a new owner. The town will have no obligation to maintain or repair the drain. That responsibility is with the owner of the property. If the owner doesn't maintain the drain and it fails, their underground parking garage would be flooded and seriously damaged. But the owner's failure to repair the drain could be because of reasons outside their control. In that case, the consequences to Brookline could also be substantial. Such failure could cause flooding downstream in other parts of Brookline. This easement is insurance for the town against that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Birnbaum?
Thank you,
Chairman Birnbaum?
moderator. Ben Birnbaum, a resident precinct 9 and at-large member of the advisory committee. Bernard nailed it. I don't have anything to add except that the advisory committee was similarly approving. It supports favorable action on this matter by a vote of 25-0 with 1 abstention. And thank you.
Okay, we are ready to take a vote on whether to grant an easement over property at 51 Bartlett Crescent. This will require a 2/3 approval to pass. The vote can drop now.
Two hundred and 42 yes. 1 no. 5 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes. We now go to Article 7. I said it passed. Oh, it passed in case anyone didn't hear me. The easement will be granted. Oh, I didn't announce the vote. I apologize. By a large margin, 242 people voted yes, 1 voted no, and 5 people abstained, and the motion passed. Now we will move on to Article 7. This article is found on pages 7-8 to 7-11 of the combined reports. It is an article relating to reducing the distribution of hard copies of certain reports. It is moved by Mr. Lebovitz and seconded by Mr. Gordon. First up are Mr. Wong and Mr. Lebovitz, who have a combined time of 5 minutes to speak. Dealing with a technical issue, so stand by.
Hello. So can we start now?
You have your combined 5 minutes.
So can we have the presentation, or should we share by ourselves?
I couldn't hear what you were saying. David, did you understand? Did you provide the presentation in advance? Did you send it to tm@brooklinema.gov?
We submit to reply back to Ms. Cosby. And
I'm sorry, I can't hear from. I'm so sorry, but we don't have any slides for you. Oh, wait a minute. Your Google Slides?
Yes.
Okay, for the future reference, other formats are vastly preferred. Okay, your 6 minutes will begin now.
all right, yeah. So for warrant article 7, pretty much
Or 5 minutes, sorry.
All right. My name is A1 Wang, Precinct 8. So this warrant article is regarding changing the bylaw from the current opt-out system to opt-in system. Next slide, please. So this is the opportunity when we find out like from the current budget. First of all, like there are 2 sections within our budget. One is in purchasing department budget. Right now we spend like 338,000 a year for printing related expenses, which is a lot, especially in postage. And like also on item 33, the printing of warrant article and reports, there's an additional 50,000. So like after consulting with town clerk and also the purchasing department, the chief procurement officers, right now on the right hand side would be what we finding out. So from purchasing department related to a warrant article with a paper toner fastener and postage expenses is around like $40,000, which doesn't include in the equipment rental amortization expenses. And for the budget item 33, there's a 20,000 range for the staff overtime, and there are additional expenses. So this is actual expense in 2021. So this would be the opportunity for us to save. Next page, please. So like in the bylaw, there will be several like sections we will need to work on. And basically all the changes will be changing currently from mailing to like changing from mailing and then like make it instead of a opt-out system, and then we use the opt-in. One of the reasons for that is like for the past 10 years, I'm probably the only one opt-out from the system, and then ends up like opt-out system doesn't work. I still receive the printed version. So the opt-out system doesn't work. The next slide, please. So the proposed operation model is like 45 days before the town meeting. There's a postcard will be provided with all related information. So like that would be serve as a purpose to contact everybody with using the physical copy. So you can order your physical copy while you like receiving the notice, and there will be also other link for downloading all the related document in digital form. And 30 days before the town meeting, people like a town meeting member can request to asking order for physical copy. So whoever still prefer to using the physical like a document, they still can get those. There's no change for anybody want to order that. And if a physical copy, okay, so people can still get that. And then there's pretty much the postcard will be designed by town clerk's office. That will be our proposed change. So next slide, please.
And I just briefly, with our remaining time, wanted to address a couple of the questions that we've encountered frequently as we've been moving this article through the committee process, starting with if I'm not on email or I don't have reliable access to email, how will I get the information to access the needed reports? The answer to that is we've included in our proposed bylaw change a requirement that a written notice be sent out in advance of town meetings and the release of certain reports to town meeting members and other officials who would be on the recipient list, to ensure that they have updated instructions on how to access any materials digitally, as well as instructions on how to register any preference for a physical copy with the clerk's office. Going to the second question, can I still get my paper copy of the combined reports or another report if I wish? The answer is absolutely yes. One difference between warrant Article 7 and previous similar articles that have failed at town meeting is we were very deliberate and careful to ensure that we will honor every individual preference of town meeting members and other officials. All one would need to do is register their preference with the clerk's office. This could be easily maintained in the existing spreadsheet of town meeting members. And we have discussed with the clerk and have been assured that this preference could be registered on a rolling basis, allowing newly elected town meeting members or town meeting members who may change their mind at some point to update their preference easily and quickly. Next slide, please. Are we the first town to consider moving to digital distribution? The answer is absolutely not. Both
You have about 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Other towns, including Easton and Winchester, have already moved to this distribution, granting their town departments more flexibility in report distribution. Why does our current system need to change? Like you heard from my co-petitioner, we have a current opt-out system. Only one town meeting member, to our knowledge, has attempted to opt out, and that request has not been honored. As we saw in the previous slide, and if we can move to the next slide, please. There are significant costs associated with print report distribution. This provides a breakdown of costs incurred only in 2021 for the distribution of warrants and combined reports. As you can see, this breaks out to a conservative, we feel, estimate of between $60,000 and $92,000 on printing, postage, and overtime expenses, which we could potentially save a great deal of, assuming high uptake among town
Please
meetings.
finish up.
Yes, Madam Moderator. Next slide, please. And can we get to the next slide as well? And yeah, addressing the point on the previous slide, this will be a preference registration will be allowed on a rolling basis. So we're
Please
very
finish up.
thank you. Last slide, next one. And just to assure you all, we've also been in close contact with the town clerk's office. And in addition to not only increasing the workload, we feel this has the potential to actually lessen the administrative burden on both the clerk's office and other town offices by reducing the need for overtime. And with that, I think we'll conclude there. Thank you.
So can I say just like 2 more sentences? All right, so pretty much for this, the warrant article is not to vote for our preferences. Every town meeting member has conflict of interest if you have any preference with the paper or without paper. So for this warrant article is voting for us to provide the flexibility for our town in the future to using any kind of a form of the way to notify everybody. So we urge you to consider this not as a town meeting member for our town. With your ordering system, upping system, we can potential to save $1 million for 10 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Representative Vitolo.
I am State Representative Tommy Vitolo, town meeting member at large. I begin by begging the indulgence of town meeting, as I'd like to take a minute to thank my friend and former opponent, Dr. Raul Fernandez. As you know, we just finished a tough campaign where 2 community members discussed in earnest the best path to better outcomes for our community and our Commonwealth. Raul ran a great race, shining a light on many important issues in Brookline and beyond. His emphasis on racial and economic justice align with our community's values and are critical as we grapple with decisions on important issues, including climate, housing, education, and transportation.
I look forward to partnering with Dr. Fernandez and welcome his support and feedback on the issues that are important to us and our community. I ask that you join me in applauding him now to thank him for his efforts on behalf of Brookline. With respect to Article 7, the article before us, I urge some town meeting members to take action, but that we as a body vote no action. Warrant Article 7 proposes to change our current opt-out system for receiving the printed warrant by mail to an opt-in system, wherein those who prefer a written copy must explicitly request one. The combined reports are, in my estimation, the most valuable document that Brookline creates. It is the culmination of thousands of hours of labor and is relied upon to guide our town meetings' decisions. Decisions on the annual budget totaling hundreds of millions of dollars of expenditures. Decisions on how buildings can be built or modified or used on billions of dollars worth of real estate. The consequence of someone getting a combined report mailing she doesn't want is indeed a few dollars. The consequence of a town meeting member who relies on a printed copy not getting a combined report is severe. It's a member who isn't fully able to make her best decision on each article, including the several $100 million budget, the billions of dollars of real estate value impacted by zoning decisions, and the bylaws regulating behavior in our community. From a risk-reward perspective, town meeting decisions are simply too important to risk denying a town meeting member her most valuable tool in making the best decisions for the town. The petitioner stated that the opt-out process isn't working. Consider the consequences of an opt-in process not working. The petitioner's slides also glibly suggest that she simply print the 643 odd pages at home. And I submit that that is not an appropriate or adequately accessible response. Our present system, an opt-out system, hasn't yet been fully embraced. There are, in fact, 2 town meeting members who have opted out of receiving the combined reports. You might presume that's the 2 petitioners. You'd be wrong. Still, it's only 2. I have no doubt that the total number of people who don't want to refer to the physical warrant is more than 2. And I encourage those town meeting members to take action, to go ahead and opt yourselves out. I also encourage the town clerk to consider including a 1-page insert in the combined reports mailer informing town meeting members exactly how to opt out, so those members can do so right away when it's on their minds, saving those shekels next time. Our work at town meeting is important, too important to err on the side of ignorance for a few bucks. For that reason, I encourage this body to vote no action.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Neil Gordon. Mr. Gordon, you have 3 minutes.
Sure. I'm Neil Gordon, Precinct 1 Town Meeting Member and a member of the Advisory Committee, speaking for a well-divided Advisory Committee. Several years ago, as member of the Advisory Committee's Administration and Finance Subcommittee, John Doggett, Dennis Dowdy, and I noted a 6-figure line item in the budget, quote, printing and postage, unquote. It was significant enough, about $250,000, to get our attention, and a short discussion followed. After some further discussion and given the perceived opportunity for cost savings, as well as other non-cost benefits, we brought a warrant article that called for a study of the subject, believing that the town could move away from print and mail communications for at least some notices and communications. Article 33 of the May 2018 town meeting passed, and a select board committee was formed to, among other things, recommend how electronic communication systems could be best utilized. That committee held several meetings. COVID came along, select board priorities changed, and the committee's work unfortunately ceased. Curiously, though, just pre-COVID, we were, as a first step towards greater reduction in printing and postage costs, beginning to discuss the question of distribution of warrants and combined reports to town meeting members. Fast forward to now. The motion before us essentially changes the default of what we receive from paper unless you opt out to electronic unless you opt in. If Article 7 passes and you want paper, you're going to need to ask for it. The advisory committee was divided with, among other concerns, timely receipt of printed materials if the process involves notice from the town that a document is available, followed by a request to the town for a paper copy and then a physical mailing by the town. The majority, though, felt that the logistics could be sufficiently managed and that the potential cost savings warranted the change. I'll note here that the budget account referred to by the petitioners in their explanation, printing of warrants, is not the account from which town meeting mailings are funded. Despite its title, that account is used to pay for assorted town meeting related expenses. Accordingly, budget line item 33, the savings cited by petitioners, that total budget amount is mislabeled, printing of warrants, and should be taken either with a grain of salt or a town meeting cookie. In any case, by a vote of 10 in favor, 8 opposed, and with 7 members abstaining, the advisory committee recommends favorable action on Article 7. I thank you.
Thank you. Amy Hummel is our next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Oops, I'm trying to make myself visible. There we go. Thank you. So this bylaw, as you've heard, makes it more difficult to obtain a hard copy of the combined, Amy Hummel, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 12, speaking for myself. This bylaw makes it more difficult to obtain a hard copy of the combined reports, and by extension, it makes it more difficult to easily access information. By forcing town meeting members to affirmatively request a hard copy, it's far more likely that someone who would like one won't get one, that it will arrive late, or the town meeting members that are new won't realize how nice it is to have one. The article creates both a hurdle to getting a combined report, and it unwittingly creates or likely exacerbates another information problem. So I worked in the tech world for a couple of decades, and with a focus on teaching and learning. And what researchers in that space have learned is that regardless of age or technical experience, the majority of individuals retain more when they read hard copy. That is science, not my opinion. Researchers have also found that most people think they are the exception to the online reading rule. And in the last 10 years, and over a little longer, I think there was a study done 2002 to 2017. They've also learned that people have not actually gotten better at reading online with practice, but worse at retaining what they do read in e-ink. In most forms, especially the scrolling type that we have, because the scrolling makes it feel fast and easy. So it feels like success, but it's not. And again, digital natives hold no advantage in consuming material online, and practice does not make perfect. So town meeting has made many recent changes to ensure that everybody knows how everyone voted on everything, abbreviating reports, creating tables so that those pressed for time can get the gist of material without having to spend so much time with it. But we're trending towards a quick and easy soundbite model of information dissemination when it is the content and the substance and consumption of that matters most. So tacit pressure towards more online-only information consumption is a step in the wrong direction, and saving money isn't a good enough reason to create the obstacle to tangible information. So all that said, if you in fact are an exception, or you are most comfortable and productive fully online, just email the town clerk right now between now and when we vote. Sorry, Ben. If you don't want a copy of the book, it's that easy. One email, one letter, one time will do it. And we don't need this warrant article for that. So in the interest of optimal information consumption, please reject Article 7. Instead, let's raise awareness about the ability to opt out. Let's prioritize consumption of tangible, robust content that maybe even your spouse, your children, or your housemates will pick up if it's sitting there on the kitchen counter. Those who prefer online environment should be the ones tasked with using it to opt out. Please vote no action. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Van Scoyac. First time we've heard from you tonight.
I know, but I hope you'll find it worthwhile. John Van Scoyac, Select Board member, and speaking for a unanimous Select Board. I want to thank Ewan and Alec. I happen to think they have done the town a real service. And I think that the proposal that they are offering, and I think the select board by their unanimous vote would say the same. It's elegant and it will save the town money. And it preserves the option for people who want a hard paper copy of of all of the town's materials, whether it be the warrant or anything else. It preserves that option for them. And I've listened respectfully to the arguments for sticking with the system we have. And I sort of feel like the last 20 years must have just been a dream, because it seemed to me that when I went through the last 20 years, everybody was discovering the advantages of doing things digitally. And yet we were hopelessly behind in terms of recognizing that we don't need to print copies of 400 and some odd page combined reports and send them to some 200 and odd people who actually don't look at them, because they'd much rather use the digital. And I know that it's an easy argument to make that, well, then why didn't they opt out? Well, they didn't. And that's not how people usually do things these days. You know, if there's a better way to do it, you do it. And then you allow people who don't like that better way to stick to their habits by opting in to continuing to get hard copy. But that seems to be the way things have gone in every other aspect of our lives. And I think people are fighting for Brookline to remain stubbornly in the past. So I'm just going to offer a couple of other thoughts on this. The select board has itself been gravitating away from hard copy. We find it perfectly acceptable and in fact better in terms of keeping track of all of the changes that occur day by day, week by week in our work materials. Devon Fields and the other staff do an excellent job of making sure that we use digital technology to its best advantage to do our work more efficiently and to stay more up to the minute in what we're presenting. As I say, those who prefer paper will still be able to get their materials mailed to them. They would just need to notify the town clerk of their preference. And so once again, speaking for a unanimous select board, we voted favorable action on the motion offered by the petitioners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Daly?
Hi, Nancy Daly, Precinct 12. I applaud the petitioners if they're able to read these hundreds of pages online. I certainly can't do it. And when I think it was about 10 of us from Precinct 12 got together to discuss the warrant, the entire group said, yeah, I want a hard copy. Contrary to what Mr. Van Scoyac suggested, I actually do read through it. I think many of us do. And I like to be able to write notes and things. So I think that the savings would not be all that great, because you would find that most people actually want the hard copy. And but nevertheless, it would be kind of a nightmare for the town clerk's office, keeping track of all the people who want it, and there would be some people that slipped through the cracks and didn't get it. I am sorry that the one petitioner has been getting it when he doesn't want it. But I think that Amy's idea that we should simply publish the give more publicity to the fact that you can opt out, and make sure when people do opt out that wish is honored, and let the rest of us have our hard copies. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is an S. Grossman. I do not know whether it's Mr., Ms., or Mix.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Simon Grossman, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. I've run some quick numbers on the environmental impact of these extensive mailings that we receive as town meeting members. I'd like to share them with you. Between the warrant, combined reports, and supplements, I conservatively estimate that we've each been sent over 400 pages. Multiplied by the more than 250 town meeting members and other officials who receive these mailings, we find we're printing well over 100 sheets of paper for each town meeting. According to the Sierra Club, a single tree can make about 10,000 to 20,000 sheets of paper. For those not doing the math in your head, that's at least 10 to 20 trees every year for town meeting. Those are inexact numbers and they're a conservative estimate, but they illustrate how much of an impact we're having and how simple it would be to save around a dozen trees a year. Article 7 meets town meeting members where they are by allowing anyone who would like to continue receiving these paper mailings to do so. But I know that myself and many others are fine with using exclusively digital copies. Don't think it's possible? I've done all my preparation for this special town meeting only with the digital copies from the town website, and I haven't used my hard copies once. I encourage you all to join me in voting yes on warrant Article 7. Thank you.
Thank you. I am not going to terminate debate at this point because we have multiple people waiting in line. And I'm going to call on some of them before I would entertain such a motion. Mr. Wang, you will not be called upon because you have already had a chance to speak. Jonathan Abbott has a question.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jonathan Abbott, Town Meeting Member Precinct 12. I have a question that I hope the petitioners would be able to answer. I believe the $50,000 cost saving estimate assumes that no one opts in for printed copies of our reports. Do we have an estimate of how many town meeting members we expect may opt in, so that we can, maybe have a more realistic sense of what cost savings might be?
Which of you would like to take that? Mr. Wong?
Sorry, can you have Mr. Lesbos response to this question?
Oh, Mr. Lebowitz?
Alec Lebovitz, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. Yeah, thanks for that question, Jonathan. That is definitely one that we've had a lot of discussion with, including with many of the members of the advisory committee. Like Mr. Gordon indicated, that $50,000 figure doesn't neatly break out into just the printings of the warrant and the combined reports and any supplemental reports. However, there is a portion of that 50,000, which is we estimate to be about 20,000. That was an overtime cost associated with those printing jobs. The main bulk of the savings that we could generate comes from the actual operations of the publishing department, where we saw over 40,000 at least conservatively in printing, postage, and additional staff costs for the year 2021. So do we have an idea of how many town meeting members would be opting into this system? We do not. So it's hard to give a specific answer to that. We've given on the conservative upper range of what savings could be, assuming, let's say, uniform adoption would be between 60 and 90,000 a year. So we would then, expect, say, 50,000 to be roughly half of that, obviously with some, additional factors that are hard to quantify.
George Abbott White. George Abbott White.
Yeah, good evening. First of all, I have to make a confession. I have a terrible bias on this subject, and actually I'll just name two of them. One is that my father and grandfather were printers, so I think that I'm wed in a kind of almost genetic way to the printed page. And the second thing is that you probably can't see it in the background too much, but 3 of the 4 walls are covered with, I blush to say, books, printed objects. And so at some level, I think I'm probably disqualified from raising, questions because I'm just so biased. But part of that bias is also experience. And that is that there are some of us who, and it's been alluded to, don't do very well squinting at screens. And there's some of us that, like myself, are dyslexic. And I know there are ways you can do it. I've never quite figured it out. But using colored pencils and tabs on my copy each year of the various reports is not just a way sort of to casually read, but it's really a way to understand and to retain, I think, as Amy and some others have suggested. Now, the real thing that bothers me is that, and I really appreciate people sort of working this stuff out, but it's so easy. It's so easy to get sort of co-opted into a certain way of thinking that then, you can kind of justify. So the idea of this is cheaper, it's more efficient. How many times have we heard this in other circumstances? We know that the first copy that you print, or at least I learned that, is the most expensive. The more you run off, the less expensive it is. But it's the whole question of cost in a different way. And that is, how are you doing today with your iPhone or, whatever? Working fine? I have bad days with mine. But when I take the book down from the shelf, it's right there, and the access issue is quite a bit different. So I think we're kind of lulled into some notion that it really doesn't matter if the onus is on us as citizens and as town meeting members, elected town meeting members, if the onus is on us to ask for the information rather than the information is given to us. And so well, as I say, while I appreciate people sort of, trying to save trees, we've planted, I think, 7 or 8 in our yard. And I suppose that doesn't really make up for all the books that we have.
Mr. White, could you please finish up?
Well, I think you get the point. So, and you also understand how I'm going to vote. Thank you very much.
Okay. The people who, let's see, there's a motion to call the question. There are 2 people have called. Need the motion to call the question. I'm gonna allow a couple of more questions or comments. And Mr. Tuckman, I just want to point out that you are a very common call a questioner. Anyway, Mark Levy has a question. I think some of it may have been answered, but what would you like to ask, Mr. Levy?
Hi, Mark Levy, Precinct 7. One of the things that has been one of my hobby horses for the last several years has been having to lug the various papers from town meeting from my mailbox to the recycling bin in the lobby. I find that ridiculous and silly, and I would rather just use the online version. But there's also a couple of questions that need to be answered. Which one is it? How long would it take the town clerk to actually adopt an efficient system for indicating on the town meeting members list who's opting in and who's opting out. And my understanding is that, and I certainly could be wrong, I was wrong once before, that they're not really set up between the town clerk's office and the IT department to do that currently. I'd like to know what the cost would be of a conversion if that's in fact the case. And the other thing is, I would love to see simply some action by town meeting to actually get this done, to actually get the town to come up with its own system for maximizing the use of online versus paper resources. And I think this warrant article is the kick in the pants that might do it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dick Benka has a question.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I understand the difference between opting in and opting out. My question goes to the language, and I apologize if I have missed something, if something is lurking in another bylaw or in another section, and I would be very happy to be corrected. But let me just say, section 2.5.1 of the article, when it's referring to special committee reports, has a paragraph at the end that says that the town clerk shall, at the request of any person listed, mail the reports. There's a similar paragraph at the end of 2.1.2 dealing with the opening of the warrant. There's a similar paragraph at the end of the annual report section in 3.4.5 and 4.2.4. But in section 2.1.5, notice of meetings, where it talks about mailing, it says a notice providing information on accessing the online materials shall be mailed to the moderator and to the representative town meeting members. That's not mailing a document, that's mailing a way to access online. Down at the bottom of that section, 2.1.5, the select board shall mail a link to the articles in the warrant for each town meeting to any town meeting member who so requests. More significantly, in section 2.5.2, the combined reports, the language says the report shall be included in the combined reports to be emailed or mailed upon request as follows. And that as follows continues. The select board shall cause a link to the combined reports to be emailed and a notice providing information on accessing such online materials to be mailed. And then it goes on from there. My question is, where in this warrant article does it say that I can get the combined reports mailed to me in hard copy and direct that that is a mandate? I'm just asking about the language. I understand the intent of the article. I'm just asking whether the language does it. And I really apologize if I've missed something.
Mr. Levitz, could you answer that?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mr. Benka. I think that's a valuable question. So what we have here is we did refine some of these proposed language changes in the bylaw with the town clerk and his office. And one of the requests that we received from the clerk was that we not be overly prescriptive in the language about how those written notices would be sent out. My understanding in talking with the clerk about what this operational model would look like is that the written notices would both contain links to access the online reports and materials, and would also contain instructions for how a paper copy can be requested from the clerk's office. So what we're calling for to be sent out in 2.5.2 is that notice, which will then provide instructions to town meeting members on how to request that paper copy. As we also mentioned, this operational model will be taking requests on a rolling basis. So once this preference has been noted with the clerk, that will stay as the noted preference for the member until that preference is updated. So we don't anticipate additional delays here in getting those reports out because the clerk should have the most up-to-date preferences going forward. In terms of a specific clause in 2.5.2 to the effect of the ones added at the end of the other clauses that you mentioned, we did not add one because I don't think we feel that it was necessary given the context of the way the article is written. If others like town council want to weigh in here on what they might think there, that'd be a welcome addition as well. But I think that's our answer to that question. Thank you.
There's been a couple of motions to call the question, and this time I will allow them. The people who are waiting to speak or ask questions are Marissa Vogt, Anthony Ishak, Mr. Wong, Scott Ananian, Connor Sheehan, Dina Priestley, Wendy Friedman, Janice Kahn, and Lee Birnbaum. We will now take a vote on whether to call the question, and needs a 2/3 vote to pass.
We have 193 yes. 42 no. 9 abstentions.
Okay, the motion to end debate has passed with 193 votes yes, 42 no, and 9 abstentions. We will now vote on the main motion, which is found on pages 7-8 to 7-11 on the combined reports. The issue is whether or not to reduce distribution of hard copies of certain reports. A majority vote is needed, and the voting will begin now.
Okay, we got 151 yes, 88 no, 8 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes with 151 yes, 88 no, and 8 abstentions. It being 10:20, I will entertain a motion to adjourn until tomorrow night. Should there be anyone? It's irrelevant at this point because we aren't going to get to it till tomorrow. Okay, who's the first one? Okay, there's been a motion by Gideon Koltoff to adjourn, seconded by Just give me a name. Wendy Friedman. All right, let's vote on whether or not to adjourn till tomorrow night.
Two hundred and nine yes, 33 no, 5 abstentions.
Motion to adjourn passes with 209 in favor, 33 noes, and 5 abstentions. This session is adjourned. We will reconvene tomorrow night at 7 p.m. and I will see you all then.